Deceived into purchasing a house for my sister, I no longer allowed myself to be the family's go-to person for money and regained control over my life. This story has been on my mind for the last few months, and I, a 32-year-old man, need to share it. The story is about how my parents deceived me into buying a house for them, and later gave it to my younger sister Perry, who is 29 years old. It also describes what happened when I reached my limit. Please note that this is a long and complicated story about being taken advantage of financially by family members and having to protect oneself in the end. When I was a child, my family always had to manage their money carefully. Even though we weren't poor, there was always a feeling of stress about money. My dad, who is 58 years old, has started many businesses, but none of them have been very successful. He always looked for new opportunities, changing jobs frequently. One month he was selling life insurance, confident he would do well. The next month, he was trying to start a home renovation business, even though he didn't have experience. Every new project followed a similar pattern, starting with excitement, then facing increasing frustration, and ultimately ending in failure. The always positive mom, aged 55, always backed up dad's choices. During dinner, she used to tell us, "Your dad has great ideas for the future," right after he quit a stable job to try out a risky project. He just needs one important opportunity to make ends meet. She worked part-time jobs, but her main job was to pretend everything was normal, even though we were struggling financially. My sister Perry and I had a very different relationship. When I was young, my family picked me to be the one who would bring hope and a better tomorrow for us. I used this lens to analyze every decision I made. I remember wanting to be part of the school music group when I was 14 years old. My parents talked to me about how joining the computer club would look good on college applications, instead of supporting my love for music. My parents always managed to find money, even when we thought we didn't have any, to pay for Perry's hobbies and interests. During high school, the stress became much greater. I maintained a perfect GPA of 4.0, not because I was naturally intelligent, but because anything lower was seen as unacceptable. You would think I had done something very wrong when I got an A in AP Physics for a semester. For days, my father only spoke to me to criticize and say that being average is not acceptable when you have to take care of your family. Adolescents need to show who they showed me that the only option for college was a technical school. They didn't ask about my interests, but they chose this path because it leads to a job with good pay. At each step, they made sure I understood how much they were giving up by borrowing money and using up their savings. My mom used to say that by eating well, you can build a better future. However, there was always money available for Perry's latest hobby or adventure. Technical school was tough because of the constant pressure from home and the difficult assignments. I ate very cheap food, had a part-time job fixing computers while studying, and always remembered how much my parents supported me. In every phone call, they talked about their money problems and hinted at when I could pay them back. Perry dropped out of high school before finishing. Actually, my parents supported her decision instead of the trouble I would have gone through. Not everyone is suited for school. They said she is brave for going after her own dreams. In the next few years, she tried different jobs like working in a coffee shop, a store, walking dogs, and training to be a yoga instructor. These were part-time jobs that only lasted a few months each. She quit them all because they didn't make her happy. Every time she started a new job, people saw it as something she was truly meant to do. I got a job at a new technology company after finishing my computer studies. Even though the salary wasn't very high compared to what others in the same field make, it was the most money my family had ever gotten. I remember calling my parents to tell them the news, hoping for a simple moment of happiness. Instead, Dad began calculating the amount I could contribute each month immediately, while Mom started listing all the bills they needed help with. To cut costs, I started living in a small apartment with 2 roommates. Even though it wasn't perfect, I was making enough money to purchase a house, but I chose to live modestly to help my parents. I tried to meet their needs while also paying my student loans and other living expenses by sending them money every month. But it was never enough. My father would call and express regret, saying they had sacrificed a lot for my education if I didn't send an additional month's payment. My job became my safe place. I dedicated myself to projects, became known for solving difficult problems, and started to move up in the company. Every bonus or promotion should have been a success, but instead they caused more stress. So, will you be able to assist us more from now on? Did they ask you a lot of questions instead of asking if you are proud of yourself? What do you want to achieve? Perry continued to have a sporadic work history and make quick decisions. When things fell apart, she would come back home after staying with friends. She signed up for online courses but didn't finish them. Our parents were always there for us and supported us through every difficulty. Even though she was already in her 20s, they would say, "She's still young, she just hasn't found her true passion yet." What I thought would be a usual Sunday dinner at their temporary home turned out to be a crucial moment. Even though I had noticed more signs than usual about their money problems, I wasn't prepared for what happened next. After many years of saving money for the family's future, Dad started to express his exhaustion with renting, mentioning that the landlord was increasing the rent again, and stating the need for their own home. The straightforwardness of the situation surprised me, even though I knew what was coming. "Sweetheart, we've been considering some things," Mom said, reaching for my hand across the table. "We have sacrificed a lot for you to get where you are now, and you are doing great. Don't you think it's time to help us buy a house?" They felt relieved after I told them I was having trouble paying my rent and saving money for the future. My father mentioned that instead of saving money for retirement, they could have invested in me. Mom cried while she spoke about how all they wanted in their final years was to have a stable life. Perry, who was staying with us, mentioned that I was living comfortably while our parents were having money problems. Several months went by during the campaign. They casually talked about the places they had visited in every phone call. Dad used to tell stories about their friends' children who had bought houses for their parents, while Mom would send emails with real estate ads just to browse. Perry also joined in, writing to me to express that our parents deserved this one thing after all they have done for me. Even though I tried my hardest, I was easily influenced by them because I had been taught to think a certain way for many years. The feeling of guilt became overwhelming. I couldn't sleep thinking about how old they were, the things they gave up, and how much they needed stability. Even though it's hard to change family relationships that have been going on for years, my therapist, whom I recently started seeing, advised me about the importance of setting boundaries. I finally gave up after months of mental struggle. I convinced myself that it was the right decision, even though I had saved a good amount of money for a down payment, which should have been used for my own future. I told myself that the feelings of guilt would stop once they had a place to live. Finally, they would be happy, and I could start focusing on my own life. I bought a simple 3-bedroom house in a calm area, nothing fancy. The monthly payments were hard, but I thought that if I continued to live frugally and shared a place with roommates, I could handle them. Everything seemed to be going fine during the initial months. My parents were very happy, telling friends and family about how proud they were of their son and showing them their house. But the number of requests went up instead of going down. They wanted to improve the backyard because they were worried about what the neighbors would think. They needed new furniture because the old pieces don't look good in this amazing house. Every time someone asked for something, they would also make the person feel guilty. "After all the help we have given you." I kept making payments on my mortgage, sending extra money whenever possible to pay it off faster. I thought it was important to give my parents the stability they never had, even though I was still living with roommates and postponing my own life. They started talking about how good it would be for Perry to have a safe place nearby. They mentioned how she was helping them settle in, but I decided to ignore the signs of caution. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. I was so used to putting their needs first that I didn't see the signs of trouble. What happened next made me confront the harsh reality of my family's relationships and forced me to make one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to make. Update number 1. I will tell you what happened when I visited the house I bought without warning. I wish I could say I was surprised by what I found, but maybe I already had a feeling that something like this would happen. It all started one weekend when I tried to call my parents to discuss the extra money I had been paying towards the mortgage. They always talked about money, so it was odd that neither of them replied. I tried many times before choosing to drive to the house. Everything was different because of what I found there. Perry opened the door wearing pajamas as if she was the owner of the house. She didn't greet with a "nice to see you" or ask why the person was there. Instead, she inquired, "What are you doing here?" with an annoyed look, as if I were disrupting her plans. As I stood there, I tried to understand everything I was looking at. I felt really nauseous when I walked in. The whole house has been turned into Perry's own space. Her own pictures had replaced our family photos on the walls, her clothes were hanging on the furniture, and her art materials were scattered across the table that used to be our parents' dining table. She was said to be starting to become popular on social media, and the extra room had been turned into a creative space for her new business project. "Where are Mom and Dad?" I managed to ask while trying to stay calm. She replied casually, as if it was common knowledge. Mom casually mentioned that Perry had missed 3 days of school that week to hang out with friends. Perry was trying to discover who she was, while I felt overwhelmed by the high expectations during my high school years. I had to make a detailed plan for financial success. Perry would often stay out late without consequences, while I would study until 2 a.m. With the help of energy drinks and feeling nervous, it was a clear difference. Perry's grades of DS and FS led to the conclusion that the traditional education system doesn't work well for her. On the other hand, my B+ in calculus resulted in a family meeting to discuss my dropping grades. My parents, clearly. What happens when your family manipulates and makes you feel guilty for years? Update 2. Things didn't go well when I talked to my parents. Actually, things turned out even worse than I had expected. Let me tell you about a very stressful family gathering I went to. When I arrived at their new apartment, I discovered that it was much more expensive than their previous one. When I entered, I noticed a large television and some new furniture. Now I could identify exactly where my extra mortgage payments were coming from. They had planned this meeting during a family meal, probably hoping I wouldn't mind if there was food. Looking back, I should have expected them to go against me, but Perry was there too, which was not part of my initial plan. They began their plan before I could even mention the issue. It should be different. Dad immediately started to act aggressively. Are you keeping track? Are you appreciating everything we have done for you? He took out a notebook where he had written down all the money they had spent on my education. Should we talk about how much we will spend on your technical school? What have we sacrificed? Mom, who can cry whenever she wants, recently started using a new technique. Tears starting to form, Mom said with tears in her eyes. We believed you would comprehend. Perry is struggling to find her way, and we simply want both of our children to do well. Isn't that what families do, help each other out? I'm putting a lot of effort into my social media profiles. This month I have. Oh, they left a couple of weeks ago in another part of the city. They found a nice place to rent. Were you not told? They definitely didn't tell me. No one had mentioned that Perry had moved in and my parents had left, even though I had been paying more money towards the mortgage for this house. I felt like the betrayal hit me hard. I called my parents while sitting on the sofa, which was now decorated with Perry's pillows. This time, Mom answered, and her explanation made me very angry. We intend to keep you informed, dear. We thought this place would be perfect for Perry, who needed a stable environment to focus on her career. You are doing well, and she needs time to decide what she wants to do. My mom sounded guilty when I mentioned that I was the one paying the mortgage. Can't you assist your sister after everything we have done for you? The extra money you pay will go towards covering our new rent. Everything stays in the family. I couldn't handle it anymore. Stay with family. I didn't purchase this house for Perry to stay in for free. I bought it for you and Dad. And without telling me, you are using my extra money for the mortgage to pay your rent. My mom tried to control me by crying and telling me I was only thinking about myself, and that family should help each other. After I got my job in it, my dad called me and told me that he thinks I have become more focused on material things. The real kicker? Most of their furniture had already been moved to their new rented place. I was the one paying for everything, and they organized this whole thing without talking to me first. I am currently concentrating on developing my brand. Perry replied casually when asked about her role in the mortgage. She answered, I can assist once I increase my social media followers. She was opening a new ring light, likely purchased with the extra money I had been giving her for the mortgage. I felt both angry and surprised while driving home. Making me feel guilty and manipulating me for years were all tactics used to make me continue paying for everything, while I neglected my own life. I have been giving myself some time to relax and think before figuring out my next steps. A part of me wants to stop making payments immediately and make them deal with the consequences. Resisting the influence of many years of education and feeling anxious about being seen as the son who abandoned his family is another challenge. One thing is clear: this cannot continue. I'm tired of always being the one my family asks for money. This weekend, I was busy with a new project. I have arranged a meeting with my parents to set some clear rules. Perry has to begin paying a large amount for the mortgage or things will have to be different. I will give another report after the meeting, but I think it will not be good. My parents are very good at making people feel a certain way, and I am sure they are getting ready to defend themselves. But for the first time ever, I am ready to stand up for my beliefs, even if it means being seen as the bad guy in their story. I understand the irony. My sister lives in a house I pay for without having to pay rent, and we still share a room. Sometimes I wonder how things got so bad, but I guess that's with the house. My favorite dinner when I was a child was the one my mom made. In a lesson on manipulating emotions, Dad showed old photos of me and talked about the past when family was most important. I tried to focus the conversation on the actual issue. We need to talk about where Perry lives and his house. The mood suddenly shifted. Mom put her fork on the table. Dad looked serious. Perry became curious when he saw her phone. Look, I started. I bought that house for you and your dad. Now that you've left and given it to Perry, you're using my additional money to pay your rent. I was not informed about any of this and that. Gotten 200 new followers. The house provides the ideal setting for my content. My job as a lifestyle influencer is about to start being successful. Perry eventually looked up from her phone to share her opinion. Perry, you are living in a house without paying rent that I am covering, while I am still living with roommates in an apartment. Is that fair? I was listening, and I couldn't believe it. Money isn't everything. You are very fortunate to have a job in technology. It's really tough for creative people like me, she said, rolling her eyes. Then they shared another surprising piece of news. Mom mentioned that they had already received estimates for the renovation. She suggested to Perry that she could transform the garage into a studio for creating content, assuming that I would cover the costs. This ends here. Either Perry needs to contribute more money for the mortgage, or we have to find a new plan. I lost it then. We helped pay for your education. We gave up everything for you to succeed, and now you're not going to give your sister the same opportunity. Dad said loudly, hitting the table. Is it the same opportunity? I laughed bitterly. This is not about opportunities, it's about being accountable. Perry dropped out of high school and has never had a job for longer than 3 months. Why are you so mean? We taught you to behave differently. Perry's mom said that Perry needs a stable environment to follow her dreams, as she cried more and more. I shouted, what about my hopes and goals? I have given up a lot for my family, like my own goals, sharing a place with others, setting money aside for later, and buying a house I can't use. From that point on, the argument became more intense as my father started listing all the things they had done for me. Mom kept crying about how dedicated she is to the family, and Perry said I was jealous of her upcoming success. And from next month on, I will only be paying the regular mortgage amount, without any additional costs. I finally gave my final decision. If Perry wants to keep living in the house, she must help out. If not, we will have to sell it. My mom said I was causing problems in the family, my dad called me greedy and unappreciative, and Perry left angrily, saying I had harmed her career before it started. You would think I had proposed something terrible. On my way back home, I started thinking about all the years I spent trying to make them happy. I thought about all the things I gave up, all the bad feelings I had, and for the first time I saw how they were controlling me. That night I felt tired but strangely liberated when I left. My father sent me many upset messages because he feels I betrayed him. Perry posted unclear messages on social media about difficult family members and handling negative people. My mother has been calling me constantly and leaving emotional voicemails saying they can't pay rent without my assistance. I have already asked the bank to stop the extra payments. I have been the family's go-to person for money for a long time, prioritizing everyone else's needs over my own, but this time I am not backing down. If they don't understand that, maybe we need to take more drastic actions. For the first time ever, I am ready to prioritize myself, even if it means being seen as the bad guy in their story. However, I have a feeling that this situation is not completely finished. Third update. Let me explain how everything went wrong and where I am today. After that last meeting, I made the hardest decision of my life. I completely stopped paying my mortgage. My phone blew up during the first week after I stopped paying for it. My mom called me 47 times, my dad called me 23 times, and Perry messaged me on all social media platforms. I blocked them, but they found ways to contact me by using their friends' phones, creating new social media accounts, and even contacting my long-lost relatives. The first message from Mom was about feeling guilty because she can't sleep knowing her son has left them. The next thing said in desperation was, "We will lose everything because of you." In some of his more confrontational messages, Dad stated, "None of my children would behave this way towards their family." Perry's social media campaign against me was especially important. She started talking about family members who are harmful and can crush your dreams often. The surprising part was when I checked Perry's Instagram and saw that she was asking for $50 for each session, where she shared her knowledge about being an influencer, all while teaching creative classes in the place I was renting. She talked about my money problems to her followers and made our living room a place to create content. The bank sent their first message in the third week. My parents sent me a message asking if I want our family to be homeless instead of discussing the problem. I saved the email without replying. Next, the flying monkeys showed up. I got calls from family friends I hadn't talked to in a long time. They were disappointed with the choices I made. I was making my parents' retirement years difficult, as my aunt mentioned in a series of letters. My old high school teacher even showed worry about the new way I'd been living on Facebook. None of them knew that I had started therapy and was getting better after suffering emotional and financial abuse for many years. My therapist helped me see that my family had created a dynamic where I was responsible for everyone's well-being except my own. The podcast Perry's Rise Above Surviving Family Betrayal, recorded in a house I bought, was a significant moment of change. The initial episode was about her wealthy brothers from the tech industry trying to sabotage her ambitions out of envy. Actually, she managed to attract a small group of people who understood her situation. The messages from the bank became more severe after 2 months. My parents decided to try a new approach and showed me pictures of cheaper homes they were thinking about buying, instead of the expensive one they were currently renting. My mom sent a text from a new number, because we are trying to find a middle ground. But I noticed that Perry had not been invited to assist or look for her own place yet. Perry organized an event to say goodbye to my dream place, which included dramatic speeches about facing challenges, because the foreclosure was coming soon. To gather money for her sudden move, she set up a GoFundMe page, leaving out that she had never paid for the house. Discovering that Perry was renting out a room to someone else and keeping the money was the final straw. This happened after my mom called me crying, saying they couldn't pay the mortgage. Perry had to move her business to her parents' rental home when the bank took over her house. She made sure to document everything for her followers, showing herself as someone affected by events beyond her control. I thought it was funny that she never talked about where the money for the house came from. My father called me for the last time, and I picked up the phone. His voice sounded quiet and defeated, not angry like I had expected. He said, "We truly believed you would give in. We never thought you would really sell the house." I understood how they saw me from that confession. They didn't see me as their child, but as a reliable way to make money that they could manage whenever they pleased. The aftermath has been both simpler and more challenging than I expected. It can be challenging when you stop talking to your whole family, even if they are harmful. It's easier now that I am only responsible for myself for the first time as an adult. I currently live in my own place. Even though it's tiny, it's mine. I make decisions based on what's best for me, not to please others. I am thinking about buying a home just for myself now that I have more money saved up. The family still tries to stay in contact from time to time. Mom sends holiday cards that make you feel guilty and subtly accuse you. Dad sends emails about children who do not show appreciation. Due to the problems in our family, Perry has apparently started a new career as a counselor, helping people heal from trauma. I'm done now. The house sale was not just about property. It was about getting away from feeling embarrassed and used for a long time. I have accepted that setting boundaries can sometimes make me seem like the villain in someone else's story. It's never too late to stop sacrificing yourself to help others if you're in a similar situation. Changing things is harder than feeling bad. However, it is your own life to lead. Don't wait as long as I did to understand that. I want to thank everyone for their kind responses and great support. I found out from your comments that I'm not the only one facing financial abuse in my family. I felt better hearing stories from many of you who had experienced similar situations. This community has been very supportive and comforting.